When the shark turned, it pulled me into the water.
Oh.
And you've got this great white swimming straight at you, and your brain's going, great white, great white. So I leapt on the back of it, grabbed the pec fins, and it just started diving down. Shane jumped behind me, and he wrapped his body around the tail.
Wow. Don't try this at home, folks.
Yeah, full disclosure.
Don't try this at home. And so I'm sinking in the water, blood coming out, the shark's attacking me, and when I turned around, I looked down, the whole bottom jaw of the grey nurse was in my left butt cheek. So I was like sitting on a handful of dinner forks.
Oh.
So I had to push its nose down to get its jaw off my butt. And then I noticed the scream, and I'm like, who's screaming? There's been a few times where you think, why am I doing this? It's one of those moments where you kind of want to reevaluate your life, but nothing changed after that.
Is there one last final message that you have for everyone about sharks?
Sharks are awesome.
This is Word on the Reef, where marine science meets adventure. Join Tanya Murphy and Brett Goodban as we plunge into the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef and explore the mysteries beneath the waves.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Word on the Reef. I'm your host, diver and marine conservationist Tanya Murphy, and joining me, as always, is Cairns Aquarium's marine educator and fish whisperer, Brett Goodban.
Good morning. Geez, we've got an exciting show today.
Absolutely, everyone. So just to get everyone into the picture, I want everyone to picture this. So it's your first diving trip on the Great Barrier Reef.
Yep.
And after sunset, the guides offer you something a little bit wild, a night dive. They start handing out waterproof torches and casually mention that the sharks are attracted to your light. Now, this happened to me on my first trip of diving on the Great Barrier Reef, and if you're like most people, you've seen Jaws, you've been spooked by Hollywood horror scenes, and you're pretty sure sharks are just waiting to rip you limb from limb the moment you jump in the water. But here's the strange thing. The dive guides have been doing night dives with sharks for years, even decades, and they still have all their limbs intact. And you'll even hear them talking about how much they love sharks, and they even have pet names for some of them.
Oh, yes. Yep.
So what do? Do you hide in your cabin and hope nobody notices that you've chickened out? Or do you jump in? Well, I jumped in, and what I saw changed my life. Graceful reef sharks were darting through the water, hunting fish, gliding right past us without a second glance. Suddenly, my fear gave way to wonder. They're so graceful, focused, and completely uninterested in me. Since then, I've dived with hundreds of sharks, and like tens of thousands of other divers on the reef each year, I've never had one so much as give me a second glance. Because the truth is, sharks aren't out to get us. They have their own favourite foods. They live on a giant smorgasbord called the Great Barrier Reef, where they have plenty of their favourite foods to eat. So humans are not on the menu, unless they mistake you for a seal or a turtle, which is kind of what you look like when you're a surfer, or if you smell like a dead fish, which is what happens if you are either spearfishing or throwing fish guts into the water on purpose to attract sharks. But thanks to decades of bad PR, sharks are now some of the most misunderstood and most threatened animals in the ocean.
Yeah.
So today, we're joined by someone who's made it his life's work to change that. Richard Fitzpatrick is a marine biologist, Emmy-winning cinematographer, and research fellow at James Cook University. He's filmed more than 150 documentaries for BBC, National Geographic, and Discovery Channel, working with legends like David Attenborough, Will Smith, and James Cameron. He's spent over 15,000 hours underwater, tagging and tracking sharks for science, sometimes by jumping on their backs and lassoing them by the tail to catch them while avoiding harming them. His research through the Biopixel Oceans Foundation has contributed to more than 80 scientific papers, and he advises the Queensland Government on shark safety and fisheries policy. Honestly, we could fill an entire series with his stories, but today we'll do our best to squeeze a few in. Richard Fitzpatrick, welcome to Word on the Reef.
Good morning.
Good morning, mate. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Great to have you on the show.
Yes, very excited.
So let's go back to the start. Tell us, what's your background and how did you first discover your love of the ocean and in particular sharks?
When I was a kid, me and my mates, we had marine fish tanks. So part of the deal with us having them, we had to collect our own specimens and we had to learn their scientific names and all that kind of stuff. So from about the age of 10, And being a boy, I wanted to have stonefish and sea snakes and all the venomous
cool
animals,
stuff.
all the cool stuff.
Yep.
And I had a pet Epaulette shark.
Right. Yep.
And so on a few occasions, Mum drove me to school with a esky full of salt water and an air pump in there, and I'd take an Epaulette shark into school and do my shark talks.
Oh, no, I love that. That's cool.
Yeah, that was... So the barrier reef and sharks have always been part of my life, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you grew up near Rockhampton, is that?
Yeah, in Rocky. I spent quite a few years there. We bounced around the country a bit, but Rocky was our hometown for the family stuff. And used to head out to the reef every couple of weekends. One of my mates, his dad was a science teacher, and we had aquariums at North Rocky High School. And ironically, he became a professor in deep sea biology. He's probably the world's preeminent deep sea biologist. He's based in Japan. And my other mate, who still work with us, Bevan Slattery, he's a big IT entrepreneur, and he funds a lot of our research. So the three of us all still kind of work together, actually.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So for any listeners who aren't aware, you had a pet Epaulette shark. Can you tell us a bit about Epaulette sharks?
Oh, I love eppies.
I've just had a month filming them, actually. It's been a long month. But Epaulette sharks are known as the walking shark.
Yeah.
Because they're probably one of the most extreme sharks on the reef, to be honest. They live on the reef top, and when the tide goes out, they can get caught in isolated pools. And particularly during summer, when it gets really warm, the oxygen drops out of the water really quickly. And so the epaulettes can actually walk out of the water across the reef to another pool. And they can actually tolerate 0% oxygen in the water around them, and then they can go to anaerobic metabolism, where they can actually start breaking down their own body muscle for energy to keep going through. So if you think about it, these things are going through... Some of those water pools can get over 40 degrees, even close to 50 during the peak of summer. Like, you know, you think of tigers and other big sharks and stuff like that, but these epaulettes go through the most extreme sort of climatic changes almost on a daily basis.
We've got quite a few at work, and we've been hatching them and having them from babies.
Oh, they're so cute as babies.
Yeah, I know. We've got Pickles, Patches, Pepper and Houdini at work. And they're so gorgeous. But yeah, you can spend ages talking to people about, you tell them that they walk like a dog and they can stay out of water, and they've got no idea. They're just awesome, aren't they?
Oh, it's a great way to break people's expectations down of what a shark actually is.
That's right.
People don't even realise it's a shark. Like, oh, it's so cute. It's got little spots
all over
little
it.
Flippers. And they're called Epaulette sharks because they've got the two big false eye spots on their back of their body, which, like the epaulettes on a uniform. And, I'm very fond. It's the first scientific name I ever learnt, Hemicilicium ocellatum. And, and they're discovering new species. There's a new one just been found in PNG. So Christine Dudgeon, who does all the work on the epaulettes, she's the mother of epaulettes. They're finding new species around the place, and some pretty exciting science coming out with the Dudge.
Oh, cool.
I'll have a look at that.
Well, we could probably do an entire episode just about epaulettes because they are getting so heavily researched. Yeah. I was lucky enough to go diving with you, Richard, on Wednesday. So just my hair's still salty from my dive on Wednesday where we did encounter a big male epaulette shark. But for any listeners out there who haven't seen a picture of an epaulette shark before and they're imagining something terrifying, it's a bottom-dwelling shark. So it's very small, very cute. It looks like a little puppy dog with spots. And so it's not your the image that you might have in your head of what a shark is. And that's what we're all about, breaking down the misconceptions about sharks. But the epaulette shark, very cute. What was the name of your pet epaulette shark that you had when you were 10?
Epaulette shark. I've never named my animals.
You didn't name it?
No, it's just like, even till today, we're still with the uni, people say, what's the name of this one? And Epaulette 1, Epaulette 2, Epaulette 3.
Very scientific.
Very scientific, yes.
Okay, so now let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum. So we've talked about one of the small, harmless, bottom-dwelling sharks. But of all sharks, few are as feared as the great white shark.
Oh.
But after thousands of dives on the Great Barrier Reef, I've never seen one. And that's because they live mainly in colder waters, don't they, Richard?
Not so much. I've missed a few on the reef. Actually, I remember as kids when we were going out to Northwest Island camping, we were about 14 or so, going in the tinny. Because we were out there in September, we actually had a white come under the tinny. So Northwest is next to Heron. So, in fact, we do get great whites into the Great Barrier Reef in the winter months. So they're a cold water animal, but during winter our temperature regime in the southern parts of the GBR are low enough that they can come up, and they do follow up the whale migrations. So great whites are warm-blooded, so they have this it's got a countercurrent vascular system. It's like a radiator system where they can recirculate the body heat and keep their body temperature higher than the water around them, which makes them such a great predator in cold water. But they do come up. The furthest recorded on the Great Barrier Reef, there was a tooth retrieved from a boat where the shark hit it off the back of Magnetic Island off Townsville.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Part of our jobs at Biopixel Oceans Foundation, we track sharks up and down the coast. We have listening stations all up and down the coast. And one of our listening stations, the furthest north we picked up a great white, has actually been in the Whitsundays. And that was just last year.
Right.
And that was tagged off New South Wales. And we've been doing a lot of work in the Cat Bunker section where we've had quite a few great whites tagged in New South Wales come up. So the New South Wales Fisheries, their shark research program, they've put a lot of effort into tagging great whites, and there's a lot tagged. And we all share the data. And the listening stations, how they work is that the sharks are tagged either internally or externally, and the little tags can go up for 10 years. Right. And if the shark goes within about 500 metres of these listening stations, we know the identification of the shark and obviously the time and date when it was there.
Wow, that's so cool.
It really gets this information onto the secret life of these animals.
Do you think that with the way that everything's changing, temperature-wise, ocean, et cetera, do you see them coming up any further north? Do you see any changes at the moment in their behaviour?
It's kind of more of ours tagged up here going further south, to be honest.
Yeah, right.
You know, we had one of our tigers go all the way down to New South Wales and then swam across to New Zealand, to the South Island, went up to the North Island and headed up to New Caledonia.
Having a full holiday.
Yeah, but there was a massive warm water event happening all the way down, which obviously we had bleaching and stuff up here.
Yep.
And, you know, they've now been, tigers, there was one spotted in Tasmania. So we are seeing, as warm water occurs, tropical species heading further south. And then obviously for the southern types of animals, the temperate animals, that's making life harder for them because there's not anywhere for them to go further south than Tassie.
And that's linking into all of our previous shows, isn't it, Tanya?
Yeah.
Like the guests,
Yeah, we've done a few shows about the tropicalisation of the southern waters. Yeah. Okay, so Richard, there is some famous footage out there of the inside of a huge great white shark's mouth. So can you tell us how on earth you captured that footage?
Yeah, that's it was the first time ever a camera had gone in the mouth of a great white, and it kind of happened by accident. I was on a research trip down with the great whites and
South Australia,
South Australia, we're at the Neptune Islands, and we were working off this massive sailing catamaran. So my job was to video the sharks as they went past the duck board to get visual IDs, and we had been tagging. And to do that, the easiest way was to have the camera on a pole and just hang it over the back. But I needed to see what was happening, and I had one of those crazy little, I think it was Casio LCD TVs back in the day.
Yeah.
Those tiny handheld ones that I had it in a waterproof bag just hanging on my chest. But to see it, I had to put a towel over my head. And so all I could see was this little 3-inch screen. And the guys would throw the baits out, pull the sharks in right to the duck board, so literally, inches from my feet. And being a good filmmaker, I used to let the sharks swim in shot and out of shot, and I'd count a few seconds before I'd reframe. And on one occasion, I was filming a tag shark, a big male, and I let him swim out of frame. But what happened is he did a quick dive down, spun around 180, and came straight back up. So I was just watching the little LCD screen, and then just saw this nose appear, teeth, and then it swallowed the camera. But unfortunately, the video cable going to the camera, I had it looped around the back of my neck. So when the shark turned, it pulled me into the water.
Oh.
So I was watching a little LCD TV, and I saw this, going inside a shark's mouth. Then all of a sudden I'm wet. I'm getting smashed between the boat and the shark. And then the guys just grabbed me by the feet, hung on. The shark thrashed around, bent the pole, and then spat the camera out, luckily. So that's how we got the footage back. And so I was literally dumped on the deck, and it was just like,
but I can guarantee as a true filmmaker of marine animals, in the back of your mind, you're going, this is going to make a great shot.
I did, yeah, and I was using a lot of shows. It's one of those moments where you kind of want to reevaluate, your life, but nothing changed after that. But I mean, the interesting thing with that, if you think about it, the guys are throwing baits off the boat, pulling them in, and so great whites, the eyes are on the side of the head, and so they can't actually see what's right in front of them at the last moment of biting.
Yes.
And so they use other senses, and one of the senses they use for those close, where is the prey, is called the ampulla lorenzini.
Yes.
Where they can feel
electrical.
pulses. Yeah.
Yep.
The bait is dead, so there's no electrical signal coming off the bait.
Yep.
Video camera in the water.
Bingo.
Gives off an electrical signal. So
Yep.
it zeroed in and hit it. And so, it was interesting for a lot of reasons. Like, there's only a couple of chips of paint taken off the camera.
Right.
So it's just the tips of those teeth, but it had a good hook into it. But it just goes to show they're really relying then on the cutting power of those teeth to then, inflict
So your
injuries
camera
to
was
their prey.
fine?
Yeah, so the camera was fine.
Yeah, I had one. I had an oceanic silvertip take my torch off its cable, filming at Osprey. It was one of this new design that they'd had. It was super bright, and if you had it on out of the water, it'd just melt in your hands. Like, it was super hot. And it was attached to this old telephone cable to the big battery pack on my tank. And as I was filming and I turned to my left, the silvertip came across to the right and grabbed the cable and took off with it. And she had my torch in her mouth, and eventually she spat it out, but I was going with it. But I had teeth marks around it, so that was cool.
Lucky she didn't take you down.
Yeah, well,
1,500 metres at Osprey.
I think she just wanted to say hello.
Oh, those silver tips at Osprey.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, staying on great white sharks for a little bit, can you tell us about a baby great white shark called Bruce that you helped to catch for the Manly Aquarium?
Yeah, that's going back. I actually wasn't on the catch team. The guys had gone out really early in the morning to catch a 7-gill out the front of Manly Heads. And I remember getting a phone call about 6:30 in the morning. They're going, "We've got a baby great white." And I'm like, "What?" And my car had broken down, so I had to run to work. And I remember one of the staff members was driving to work going, "Richard's running. That's a pretty rare thing." Anyhow,
Must be something special.
Yeah, and he didn't stop to pick you up, just drove straight past.
No, they were almost there. I was almost there. Anyhow, so then... Yeah, it was this little baby great white. It was about 1.3 metres long. They came into Little Manly Cove on the ocean side, and so we drove, and we had a shark transport unit on the boat. So we had a shark transport unit on the ute, and we drove that over to meet them. And I took a surf ski with me as well. So when the guys pulled up, they threw the great white back in the water, and it was still had the hook in it and the long line.
Yep.
So then I clipped the long line to the back of the surf ski, and I just started paddling around to let the shark recover before we put it in the truck for the quick 2-minute drive to the aquarium. And that was pretty cool, paddling along. This little dorsal fin would pop up, and all the morning people are just yelling out, "Shark, shark," behind me. Like, I know.
And you're just looking at it going, how cute is that guy?
Oh, it was gorgeous.
Yeah. I mean, so to be clear, you're paddling along with a great white shark, towing a great white shark behind your surf ski.
Yeah.
With the dorsal fin sticking out of the water, and all the morning walkers are seeing.
Watching this thing happen. So, yeah. It recovered very quickly, so I didn't actually have to, skull drag it through the water. It was just directing it, and then just kept an eye on it until we're happy with its swimming strength before we put it through the next stress. And then we ended up having it in the aquarium for 5 days.
Yep.
And I remember myself and the curator, I was the biologist down there at the time. We spent the whole 5 days with it. We didn't leave it. Hardly ever slept. And the Manly Aquarium, the old one, it's just been knocked down after 50 years of...
That's right.
Yeah, pretty sad. But it was a big donut-shaped tank with the tunnel in it.
Yep.
And before that, the only other attempt to have a great white in captivity was at the Steinhardt Aquarium in California, which was also a donut-shaped tank. So it was really good design for pelagic fish because there's no corners and they can just swim against the current. And so we put it in, and the most interesting thing that happened straight away was... there's a few things really, but our 8 grey nurse, who are all twice the size of this baby great white, all congregated together and sat on the bottom.
Really?
They did not swim for 2 days. We've got footage of us going up to these 3-metre grey nurse, picking them up off the bottom, letting them go, and they just sink back to the bottom again.
The boss had arrived.
Yeah, and they'd been in captivity for 15 years. I mean, as soon as the shark went in, everything's like, what?
Isn't that incredible?
Everyone knows who the boss shark is as soon as it got in the tank.
But he never fed. We tried to feed him a few times. But as soon as we put him in the tank, we all jumped in the tank because, you're putting a oceanic animal into an aquarium, we didn't want it smacking into walls and stuff.
Yes.
And I remember, being on scuba, and you've got this great white swimming straight at you, and your brain's going, great white, and then you put your hand out and onto its nose and push it off the wall. And we had to modify the tank a lot during that period, just putting foam mats up on any sharp corners, but
Crash pads.
But if you think about it, it's an oceanic animal going into a totally artificial environment.
Right. Yeah.
Multiple light sources. It didn't settle down at all. And on the 5th day, you just noticed looking at it, it was stressed. And it was like, let's get it out of here. So then we captured it again, took it back out to sea, and let it go. And I remember I was the last one to see it. I was with it because we were nursing it, swimming with it, letting it get swimming again, and then Ian let it go, and then I followed it, and you could see the strength in the tail beats picking up as it swam off. So it was an amazing experience. And
imagine if you had the tagging technology back then, you could see if Bruce was still out there.
Yeah, but to be honest, we did think about putting external tag on, but because it was so stressed in that whole, what can we do to minimise stress? And so we did make the decision not to put an external tag on it. But since then, Monterey Bay Aquarium did them, and they did a number of them, and I think it was about 160 days was the longest they had one before they let it go.
They're an oceanic animal. Do you think that that's just an Epaulette override for them, that hypersensitive, just way too much for them, right?
Too much. Yeah. And not just the Epaulette lorenzini. There was an area in our tank that it was having a lot of trouble in, which ironically, because of the Epaulette, that was where the switchboard was on the other side of the tank.
There you go.
But it's not just that. It's just, you think of these things, like a shark, any of these sharks in the ocean is like one of those American AWACS aircraft that sucks in every bit of data and energy. And,
that's right.
And you think of sharks on the reef. They're swimming around with all this visual, stimulus, sound, smell, all these things, and they can filter all that data to know when something's not right. That animal's not right, I'm going to target that animal.
And that's a really interesting way of putting it, isn't it? Like I mentioned that in my shows as well. It's that when you watch our sharks swimming around the tank, our grey reefies, they're constantly collecting that data, aren't they, to pick out that sick and injured creature, because they're an apex predator and they want the lazy. They want the sick and injured animals. So, they
have to be very sensitive.
Yeah, they're just on it.
To track things in the big, wide ocean.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If they're just surrounded by too much stuff.
Has there been successful at having any larger great whites?
Well, Monterey Bay, they only ever went for the juveniles.
Yeah.
And then they did a step-by-step process. In the early days, they just kept them in a sea pen, and then, they learnt a lot there. They actually had, in their big ocean tank at Monterey Bay Aquarium, they actually inject oxygen into the water to get the O2 levels up, because they've got tuna and all this other stuff in there. And they put the whites in, and, the whites fed, but the decision was made that when the shark actually ate something else in the tank, it was time to let it go. And so they were all, I remember going over to see one of them, it looked amazing, but between 8 and 12 I think they did, and then they decided, we've learned enough, we've done enough, no one should do this again.
No,
and so then there is no plans for
I totally agree with you. I don't think, once that research is done, I don't think they deserve to be treated in a tank.
Exactly.
Right, so my advice to any listeners out there, if you want to be fairly confident of avoiding being bitten by a shark, it's really simple. Just make sure you don't swim around holding a box of dead fish.
Yes.
But that's a rule that you break all the time, isn't it, Richard? Often it's in the name of science to attract sharks for tagging, but you've also done it just for fun. And one time at the Manly Aquarium, it came back to bite you on the bum, didn't it?
Oh, righto.
That was my... It's probably the only time I've ever done it for fun. Every other time is always done for a reason. But it was my last day at work. Wanted to go out for bang. And with the aquariums, most of the fish we feed the sharks and everything are frozen fish, and we put vitamin supplements in them and all that kind of stuff. But if you ever put fresh fish in, it goes nuts.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the Manly Aquarium, we used to walk on the seafloor, no fins, so you had a really, really heavy weight belt so you could walk. And then, because it was my last day at work, the aquarium had a lot of history for practical jokes. We used to crash tackle divers in there, tie them up, leave them on the bottom with their air gauge sticking up, and you'd just go check them every 5 minutes.
If you work for workplace health and safety, cover your ears.
Yes.
All these things have changed now. You wouldn't get away with it. But anyhow, so I had some fresh fish in the bucket, and I'm going along, and my dive buddy Adam was behind me, and I was just going along, and then I felt this I got hit really hard and corked in the butt cheek, and then I thought it was him grabbing me, and then I thought, geez, he's got long fingernails. And then when I turned around, I looked down, the whole bottom jaw of the grey nurse was in my left butt cheek.
Oh.
Upper jaw was on the side. And what had happened, because I had the fresh fish, the big male, Patches, was right behind me, and Adam saw it, and he went up and just hit it in the side to make it swim away. But when he hit it, it just took off, and its nose corked me, and as it bounced up, its lower jaw went in. So I was like sitting on a handful of dinner forks.
Oh, well.
And then he was laughing, because he said when it hit so hard, the whole shark, this 3-metre shark, concertinaed up. And then,
it's like a
then
cartoon.
it stuck on my butt, so I had to push its nose down to get its jaw off my butt. And then I was like, and I still had the bucket of fish, and I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And then I noticed this scream, and I'm like, who's screaming? And I turn around, there's a tour guide in the tunnel with the microphone. There's about 200 people just watching, all these eyes and saucers, and she's screaming in the microphone.
Yeah. You forget that you're in a reverse fishbowl.
Yeah, that was Katie Deere. She used to be head of speech pathology here at the hospital here. Yeah, and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to keep going. And then I was like, oh, my left leg's not working too well. But yeah, so I just hopped on my right leg, jumped over the tunnel into the shark feeding spot, and pulled the lid off the bucket. And then I'm looking at all the tourists as I pulled the lid off the bucket, and they all just pointed really quickly.
Yeah.
So I just ducked, and there was a big slap from behind as another grey nurse had come from behind. And my head was between it and the bucket, and it just wanted the fish.
Right.
And then as I ducked, it snapped, and I took a tooth across the back of the head as well.
Wow.
But the worst thing was the next, we had the going away party that night, but then I was driving from Manly back to Queensland to Townsville the next day.
With a shark bite
in
your butt cheek.
So they gave me one of those donut cushions as a going away present. So, I mean, that was totally my fault. I was doing what we shouldn't have been doing.
Yep.
Don't try this at home, folks.
Don't try this at home.
But when you think about it, I mean, for us, we're giggling because we've worked with sharks for a long time. But, I mean, of all the sharks that you don't want to get bitten on by the bum, it's a grey nurse teeth, full of teeth. I mean,
they're
big
long,
puppy dogs,
slender,
but gee,
and sharp.
they got a nasty set of choppers.
Yeah.
They're amazing animals. And I'm actually working on them again now for the Queensland government.
Oh.
And it's nice to be going back to work on these critically endangered sharks. It's really cool.
Yeah, I've dived with grey nurses off Mooloolaba and the Sunshine Coast, and they're really docile normally. Don't go carrying buckets of dead fish underwater, guys, and you can have really peaceful interactions with grey nurse sharks. They've got the dinner fork shaped teeth for a reason, because rather than tearing limbs off, they're designed to stick the fork in a fish, right?
Yeah, grab the fish and swallow it whole.
Yeah. So they don't normally go for humans. It was a case of...
stupidity.
But one to remember, right? What a last day, mate.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Well, but let's head back to the tropics of far north Queensland now. So in 1995, a Hollywood film, The Island of Dr. Moreau, starring Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer, was filmed in far north Queensland, and the opening scene features a shark attack. So tell us about your role in that, Richard.
He's digging this stuff up on the past. So when I was down working at Manly Aquarium, I met Ron and Val Taylor, and Ron got me more into the filming side of things and helped kick my career off, because they filmed the underwater scenes for Jaws, famously. And then, it came time for this feature, and because of all my work with sharks in captivity, they asked me to come up and do the stunt work and shark wrangling for it. And Shane Down, who's still up at Quicksilver, is the other diver there. And when we saw what had to happen with these tiger sharks, I was really adamant that I didn't want to hook a tiger shark and use it for the filming purposes. If you look at all the James Bond movies, you can see the hook mark in the tiger sharks that they use. That's always their favourite shark for the James Bond movies.
Right.
And so we had a couple of marlin from the game fishing competition as bait, and we went out to sea. And then, we got to the point where we had two tigers off the back of the boat, and it was like, wow, we could just jump on those. They're that close.
Yeah.
And I remember Ron and Val were up top deck having lunch, and we're just looking at it, and we're just in shorts. And I go, "What do you reckon, Shane?" He goes, "Yeah." He just grabbed a rope, and then I go, "Ready?" And we just leapt on it. So I leapt on the
as you do,
back of it, grabbed the pec fins, and it just started diving down. Shane jumped behind me, and he wrapped his body around the tail, and shark was going down and then stopped, and then Shane sort of tapped me, so he just let go and we both swam to the surface, and he got the rope on.
Wow.
Don't try this at home, folks.
Yeah, full disclosure.
Don't try this at home. And so...
These are trained professionals.
Yeah. So that was the first time we had tail rope a tiger, and actually showed how they immobilise very quickly, which led to how we ended up doing a lot of tiger shark research in the future by simply grabbing them by the tail. And I invented this thing called the shark claw, which is like a handcuff that snaps onto the tail of the shark.
Because they sort of go into a sort of a sleepy state.
Yeah, tonic immobility. I mean, in the early days, we used to bait the sharks in. We'd have a barbless hook on the bait, pull it close, and then I used to jump in the water and then tail rope them underwater, and then got knocked out a few times.
Jeez.
And then the I don't know, the uni, something about OH&S, which is banned from that. And then that's when I came up with this shark claw.
So they told you, Richard, you're not allowed to keep jumping in the water with these huge 4-metre long tiger sharks.
Yeah, the fieldwork, paperwork, I just wrote tagging sharks, and then 60 Minutes did a story on what I was doing, so the cat was out of the bag. Yeah. So then, years later, came up with this shark claw, which you don't have to be in the water with the shark, so my mum was really happy. So it's, you bait the shark to the boat, and you could pick which one you wanted and clip it onto the tail as it swam by, and it was attached to about 5 metres of rope and a huge fender float, so then the shark would swim off dragging the fender float, which would apply drag to the tail, and they'd stop swimming within about a minute. And I mean, the most recent time we did it was actually with Will Smith on the Disney series Welcome to Earth, and if you look really closely, it's still streaming, but there's a shot where Will's right next to me as I'm working on the shark, and they actually had to blur out the top of my butt crack, which was next to Will's head.
Did you have the bit of the old credit card swipe?
Yeah, a bit of the credit card swipe was there, plumber's crack. And so, anyhow.
Right.
So, but, ironically, the movie led to all that kind of stuff. And, we had these Hollywood dummies that were sent out that were perfect replicas of the actors. And the permit we had from Kumbroopa at the time was no one was to know what we were doing in the filming of this sequence. And the boat was down at Yorkeys Knob. It was a Saturday lunchtime, so the place is packed.
Yeah.
And then me and Shane are there, what do we do with these two mannequins? They're in full military uniforms. So we're like, just wrapped a blanket around it. We just carried past everyone. No. And everyone's just having lunch. And we carried it right down the end of the jetty, threw it on the boat, got the second one, went by. No one asked anything.
Yeah, one of them's got a gouge out of its side because it's a replica of a shark bite victim. Yeah,
well, I was initially that he got shot by a flare gun and fell into the water. And while we're at sea, they actually changed the director. And then it ended up being they wanted a knife fight. And then we just going, like, these dummies aren't working with the sharks at all. So they flew out, came out in a helicopter, lowered a bag down with new military uniforms and a carton of VB. And so then me and Shane ended up being the stunt doubles for the dummies that didn't work. So in the openings, I'm the one who gets stabbed. I fall in the water, blood's coming out, and then the tiger shark attacks me. And that's the opening scene. So, and then because we would tail rope the shark, immobilise him, then you could just push him into shot. So literally I'd let the tiger come up to me and I was dead, but I was still holding its nose while it was buccal pumping, still breathing, and it then looked like it was eating me.
Yeah, so you literally staged a shark attacking you in the water with fake blood and just sort of pushed the shark towards yourself.
Because it wasn't planned, no safety crew, no safety divers, no nothing. It was just, Ron would be in there because dead people had the blood coming out, dead people don't equalise.
Yes, that's correct.
And so I put a heap of weight belts on under the military uniform.
Yeah.
And so I'm sinking in the water, blood coming out, the shark's attacking me, and then I could hear the film camera go, and when it would stop, then I'd hit the bottom and have to kick off and swim to the surface, still with the weight belt, full military uniform, boots on, no safety divers, nothing. It was just like classic.
Yeah.
But Val, I still see her a lot, dear friend, but she reminded me at a talk I was giving recently, she got up and told everyone because I'd forgotten about it, but because the film camera only had 4-minute loads, then Ron would have to rip up, change film and come back down. But she goes, during the film changeover, you jump in the water and there'd be Richard on the bottom with the tiger shark sitting on the bottom, head in the current, and I'd just be laying on top of her, just sitting and patting, keeping it calm.
Holding her down, keeping her
down, keeping her immobilised between film loads. So, we kept the sharks for about an hour or so and then let them go and catch the next one and do it again.
So that was a bit of a Hollywood performance, but it did help you to go on to develop your techniques for safely or sometimes safely catching sharks for scientific research purposes. So I've seen in your documentary from, I think, 2003 Shark Tracker, where before you developed the shark claw, you were literally jumping in the water with a huge 4-meter tiger shark. It's thrashing around. It's crazy footage. It's like the water is just splashing everywhere with this shark, and you just go and jump right on in. You're pretty fearless. Have you ever been really terrified by a shark encounter?
There's been a few times where you think, why am I doing this? But then you just got to get it done. But I mean, we kind of pioneered a lot of this really hands-on approach because I came from the public aquarium background where we were catching, you had to take sharks out, measure them, weigh them, treat them for different things, put them back in. So when I came back to the Great Barrier Reef, I was applying this hands-on knowledge to in-water reef shark research for the first time. Out at Osprey Reef, we were tail roping white tips and grey reefs out there, and then with the tigers and all that kind of stuff. So it came from that background, and then obviously, if in captive background, you're trying to treat the animal with utmost care as possible, and then so not using hooks and tail roping them was the whole philosophy we were doing back in the early days, and then just carried through. But I mean, you get hit and smashed around and. By the tail, particularly.
A line keeper's going to get scratched at some point.
Yeah, I've had a lot of tail hits that have concussed me and caused damage.
Yeah, they hurt.
Wow. So we've been talking extensively about Richard's encounters with all different types of sharks, and we could keep doing that for literally days.
Yes.
And we may do so in future shows if we can get Richard back. Pretty please.
Pretty please.
But since we're on to the last 15 minutes of the show, let's go ahead and talk about some of the shark research that you're doing nowadays and what that is sort of helping with.
Yeah, so 6 years ago we set up Bipixelations Foundation, which is our research arm of the business, and that has grown. We've got a lot of people working in there. It's headed by Dr. Adam Barnett. We've had PhD students come through now, which we're very proud of. But we work on a lot of things. So probably the core is looking at the movement patterns of shark species. So we actually manage the listening array for the federal government in the state of Queensland. So it's those receivers I was talking about earlier. There's 320 we have to manage up in the whole of the reef now. And then, we're doing tagging ourselves a lot on tigers, bulls, hammerheads. We discovered the whale shark aggregation up in the far north of the Great Barrier Reef at Wreck Bay.
Wow.
And so we've got Ingo Miller's just finishing his PhD on that at the moment, and we've got some amazing tracking data. So if you go to the Bipixelations webpage, you'll be able to see where these sharks are live. So we have 13 whale sharks still pinging in at the moment, and plus bulls and tigers and hammers all over the place.
Yep.
So, knowing where sharks go, seasonal patterns is really important as to managing human-shark conflict.
Yep.
We also do a lot of work for the Queensland Government at areas where things have gone wrong, like in the Whitsundays and the southern part of the Great Barrier Reef, where we've done intensive studies to look at what's happened and what caused those incidents. And it all comes back to human behaviour, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right.
People putting food scraps in the water.
Yep.
Like the tracking data at the Whitsunday shows the animals moving in through Sid Harbour. There's nothing abnormal in terms of the numbers or anything like that. And to be honest, there's probably less sharks there than other areas we have. But it's the timing of those movements at lunchtime and sort of sunset when people are cleaning fish and throwing food scraps in the water.
Yep.
So the biggest threat in the ocean is humans.
There you go.
Biggest threat to ourselves is humans.
Our behaviour. So then, once you have the research there, then you're kicking off education programs. So we've got the Shark Smart program that the Queensland Government's running now, which is one really good part of their project as opposed to other parts. So, so there's a lot happening. We're doing mantas, we're developing new technologies. We're actually developing our own tagging technologies. Last year we put a 4K camera on the back of a whale shark up north and actually could just see how the sharks are working and how they're using that area. So, with the whale sharks, we know that it's a seasonal movement pattern now, where they're going up to Wreck Bay sort of end of November and December. They hang there for 2 months and then they head way out into the Coral Sea. And knowing where, and particularly these oceanic species, it's going into international waters, other country territorial waters. They're an endangered species. So then you need that data so you can look at how to best manage and protect these animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So what has your research showed you about the threats to sharks? How threatened are sharks? Because many fishermen complain that sharks are coming in higher numbers than before and stealing their fish off the fishing lines. So some people in Queensland are under the impression that sharks are in record numbers. Is that true?
Yeah, so that's called shark depredation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues to unpack here.
Maybe for another episode.
Another episode we could go into all that. But I mean, yeah.
In a nutshell.
Well, there's a few things there. It's like the shark stocks on the Great Barrier Reef were fished down dramatically through the 70s and 80s. And you talk to the old fishermen, they're like, it was like this back then.
Yeah.
It's just that you have this whole cohort who have grown up and started fishing on the Great Barrier Reef when we were down to less than 20% of our shark stock. And so the shark numbers have recovered
to a healthier.
Yeah, healthier. And this is an irony of having, Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, a third of the reef protected, 2/3 still open for fishing. But in these fishing areas, everyone's got their GPS and they know exactly where to go. They've got their 3D sounders and all that kind of stuff. And, you go out and you catch your first couple of fish, but then, sharks, lazy and smart, they know quite quickly, if I hang here, see that shadow, I hear that noise, if I hang here, something's going to come past and I can hit it really easily. It's going to make an easy meal. Interesting, we had a student looking at this and we had 360-degree cameras under the boats. And it's not just sharks depredating the fish catch. You got trevally, mackerel, and others coming through and smashing trout as they're coming up.
Right.
But one of the big things is for sustainable fisheries is that, we've got a bag limit of, I think it's 7 coral trout. But if you're having to catch or hook up 30 or 40 to get your 7 on the boat, it's not the 7 you've killed 40. And the reason that bag limit was put in place in the first place was for sustainable catch, that we know how fast the trout grow, how often they reproduce. So shark depredation is a major issue for fisheries management. And so the research is showing, it's occurring. We still need to look at what is the population status. And that's one thing, hopefully, with the new shark project, that they are, with the Queensland government, putting money into finally looking at the population status of the different species so we can know what's happening. But, are the sharks booming in numbers? Probably not. But
on a global scale, they're quite endangered, aren't they? Especially some species.
Not so much on the Great Barrier Reef. To be honest, Australia's got probably the best shark stocks in the world in terms of management. And we are looking at Australia in the future as being the shark ark, like to repopulate sharks in countries where the numbers have been knocked down. We're actually starting that now in our leopard shark project, shipping out.
Wow.
We still have, there's fisheries here on it, stuff like that. But until we get proper stock assessments done, we're all just making...
Yeah, you got to get that data.
Judges.
Yep.
But one interesting thing, particularly spearos and fishermen out there, fisher people out there, they talk about the resident bull shark or the resident black whaler that's smashing their catch. What our data is showing is that bull sharks aren't resident. They migrate. So we've got one individual that we've tracked for 3 years, Karchia. She goes from Torres Straits and then she goes up the Noosa River each year.
Wow.
They're going, and we've got them going past Sydney. They're massive migrators. But there's a shark out there called the pig eye. Have you heard of a pig eye?
I have.
Okay.
Yep.
But it looks exactly like a bull shark. And it has total different behaviour. So it's one of those things is like, the more we know, the less we know. And now we have to start looking at the difference in how these animals are using. So we really need science to inform us how we deal with these animals. Because, here in Cairns, we live with the world's most venomous animal, the box jellyfish.
That's right.
Through good science, we know when and where it occurs.
Yep.
We've got really good practices in terms of nets and stinger suits and education programs.
Yep.
And more importantly, the lifeguards are out there sampling each day. And if they find an irukandji, they shut that beach down and the one to the north and the south. And, so we're managing people, not the jellyfish.
Yeah,
and that's all come from, the amazing research by Jamie Seymour out at uni.
Yeah.
We need to get that level of knowledge on sharks so we can inform people and manage people, not the sharks.
And that's something
true.
that we attempt to do in my shark shows every day at work, is everyone comes in with a preconceived idea and it's getting them to leave that show just being a little bit more educated on how they behave and what you're getting yourself into when you get into their pond.
Yeah, totally.
It's just changing that perception that they're not just movie ticket sellers.
No.
They're incredible.
But I mean, we do have some endangered species, particularly sawfish, glyphis, particularly inshore ones where we really need management intervention. But this whole reef shark idea that has started with Conservation International and collaborators from all over the world were coming together to get leopard sharks back into Indonesia as a target spot initially, and Thailand's starting as well.
Yep.
And it comes from captive animals.
Yep.
The eggs
That's
are
right.
laid, the eggs are shipped to New Zealand and hatched. And one of the cool things we'd started about 18 months ago is to increase the genetic diversity of those stocks is we're actually going out collecting sperm from the male leopard sharks on scuba in the field, bringing that in and artificially inseminating the captive females around the place.
Yeah, I read up on that because they can parthenogenesis, and which is a whole other show.
But that's just the first. We are looking at a whole heap of different shark species, and Australia is going to be the key location for us to source this genetic material from to help repopulate shark stocks.
Well, that shark arc is coming up in my show now. I like that. I like that.
Wow, guys, I have about 1,000 more questions.
Yeah, me too.
Which we need not right now because we've got only about a minute left, but at some future point we're going to be asking, how do you go about collecting sperm from sharks, and dive a bit deeper into some of those other things that you've just brought up. But since we only have a minute left, is there one last final message that you have for everyone about sharks?
Sharks are awesome.
Yeah.
And we are doing a lot of social media and bipixelations of the research as it happens and the tagging as it happens. And as I said, you can follow all these animals live. So, check out bipixelations and all the socials and you'll see a lot of the cool stuff. And you'll see how we extract sperm from leopard sharks.
There you go. Yep.
Something you never thought that you would see in your life.
No.
Never thought that you would want to see. So, Richard Fitzpatrick, marine biologist, Emmy-winning cinematographer and research fellow at James Cook University, one of the most adventurous shark researchers in the world. Thank you for all your amazing work in that space. And thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, mate.
And thanks so much to all our listeners for joining us on Word on the Reef. I'm Tanya Murphy. My co-host is Brett Goodban. And we'll be back next Friday at 10 o'clock with more awesome marine science adventures.
Have a great week.
Best fishes. See you next time.